Hello class, good day. So for today, we will be discussing about business combination part 1. So this is the first chapter on accounting 12 in which we will be discussing the basics or the concept of business combination and the introduction. Okay? So itong copy ng module, meron na kayo dito sa Canvas. I have uploaded this. Okay, so if you want to have access on this module, you can easily have that on your Canvas. Ano? Kindly view that on the Canvas. So, introduction. So, what is a business combination? So, a business combination is an event or transaction when one company acquires another or when two or more companies merge into one. After the combination, one company gains control over the other. So, this is an event wherein merong dalawa or more na party na involved in which the acquirer, the acquirer acquires the acquiree. Okay po? Kumbaga parang ah bibili niya or pwedeng inabsorb niya yung si acquiree. So, there are minimum two parties involved. Number one is si acquirer and pangalawa naman is si acquiree. Si acquirer, siya yung magdo-dominate dun sa acquiree. And meron tayong dalawang types ng business combination. Okay? So as you can see here, we have two. Number one is asset acquisition. So ito true purchase to ng asset. Kumbaga merong cash consideration or other forms of consideration like non-cash asset and pwede ring equities, okay, ng kapalit in exchange of the asset to be acquired. And number two is stock acquisition. Okay? So stock acquisition, dito naman ang ina-acquire naman is yung tinatawag nating controlling interest. Okay? So what is asset acquisition, sir? So an acquirer, kasi sabi ko lang kanina, purchases the asset and assumes the liabilities of the acquiree in exchange for cash or other non-cash consideration. So, eto class, ang pina-purchase lang dito ng ng acquirer is yung tinatawag nating identifiable assets. Okay po. So mamaya papasadahan natin kung ano yung mga identifiable assets and identifiable liability. Okay? So kumbaga bibilin lang ni acquirer in exchange for cash yung asset less and i-assume din niya yung liability ng isang business. Okay? And then meron dalawang form ng asset acquisition. Okay? So this form of business combination can manifest through number one is what we call a merger and number two is what we call a consolidation. Okay po? So, a merger, here, what happens is two or more companies merge into a single entity which shall be one of the combining companies. So, meron tayong example dito, si GG Corporation, then nag-merge siya kay EE Corporation. Ang magiging pangalan niya, it's either GG Corporation or si EE Corporation. Kumbaga, na, 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 na-dissolve yung isa, and then, yung isa naman inabsorb yung kabilang company. Okay? So, nagkaroon ng merger. So, either of the two pwedeng maging, kumbaga, yung maging withstanding, yung matitirang company. So, GG Corp or EE Corp. So, walang bagong company ang na-form dito during the merger. Number two is through consolidation. Two or more companies consolidate into a single entity which shall be the consolidated company. So, for example naman dito, si DD Corporation nag-consolidate with FF Corporation, nag-form sila ng panibagong corporation which is the DF Corporation. Okay, so that is the difference between the two, the merger and the consolidation. How about dito, sir? Stock acquisition. Okay, so stock acquisition, the acquirer obtains control over the acquiree, wrong spelling, yan, by having majority ownership in interest in the voting rights of the acquiree. Nag-auto ano kasi, nag-auto correct. Yan. So example is more than 50% holdings of ordinary shares. Okay? So ito common na common tong stock acquisition. Kumbaga, this is a very common practice, especially on dominant companies. Ano? For example, let's give an example. Si Jollibee, okay? Si Jollibee, most of the time, yung mga rising na companies, it tends to buy, okay? The corporation tends to buy controlling interest of that rising company. So, for example, si Jollibee, uh, subsidiary niya tawag dito, si Mang Inasal, okay? If alam niyo yon, Jollibee, subsidiary niya si Mang Inasal, si Red Ribbon. So, umaga, ang ginagawa niya, binibili niya yung majority ng stocks, ordinary stocks ng mga corporation na yon para makontrol niya yung competition. Okay? So, Jollibee is trying to control the competition by purchasing yun nga po, yung majority of the stocks of those small companies na pa-rise pa lang, kumbaga pa-usbong pa lang, hinaharangan niya na agad. Ano? So, that is one form of stock acquisition. So, sir, sa ganong klaseng example, ano ang maitatawag ko kay Jollibee since siya yung bumili? Si Jollibee ay isang corporation din. And then, ano yung matatawag ko kay Mang Inasal? Okay? Si Jollibee, that is what we call a parent company or a parent corporation. Okay? So, the parent is the acquirer. So, yun, si Jollibee yung nag-purchase ng stocks ni. Yung magiging ano naman niya, acquirer naman niya is si subsidiary. Si Mang Inasal naman to. Okay? So, the acquirer or the entity having majority of the ownership interest. Subsidiary, the acquirer or the entity or entities having non-controlling interest. Okay po? So, ibig sabihin lang nito, pag more than 50%, pwede yan na 50.01. Okay, 50.01%. Not necessarily 51. Pero 50 and above 50, basta mag-above 50%, automatic, ang ang magiging parent natin is yung may hawak ng 50%, above 50% na shareholding, na holdings ng ordinary share. Okay po? That is stock acquisition. Up next, PFRS 3. So what does PFRS 3 indicates? So PFRS 3 indicates that it defines business combination as a transaction or other event in which an acquirer obtains control of one or more businesses. Business combination is also referred to as true mergers or mergers of equals. Sir, paano ba nagkakaroon ng control ang isang corporation sa isa pang corporation? Okay? So, mag-uugat yung tanong na yan sa kung paano ba nag-ooperate or paano ba nag-decide ang isang corporation. Okay? So, most of the corporations, especially public corporations, they decide, okay, or they base their decision on the votes of their shareholders. And specifically, the only ones that have the right to vote are those holding the ordinary shares. Okay po? So, sabihin, if majority of the ordinary stocks is held by a certain corporation, he has control over that company. Okay po? Nagkakaroon ng control kapag yung 50.01% or more than 50% ng ordinary stocks is held by a corporation, a parent corporation in relation to a subsidiary. Pero, not all the time, control is defined by quantity. Okay po? Hindi all the time, quantity ang nade-define sa control. Merong exception to the rule. So, what is that exception to the rule? So, how is control determined? So, number one, meron ditong enumeration kung saan hindi magmamatter yung threshold na more than 50%. So, basahin mo natin to. Commonly, control is normally presumed to exist when the ownership interest acquired in the voting rights of the acquiree is more than 50%. So, 50.01 and above. So, however, again, may exception, This is only a presumption because control may still be obtained with without sorry without necessarily acquiring more than half of the acquirer's voting rights, such as in the following instances. Okay, class, ingat kayo dito, no? Ang may voting rights lang dito, yung ordinary stocks. Pag ang sinabi sa problem, preference shares ang binili ng corporation, ako baga nag-own siya ng 50% ng preference shares, that is not a parent company. Okay? So, kailangan ordinary stocks, not preference stocks. Okay po? Such as in the following instances. So, ito yung exception to the rule ng 50.01 threshold. So, number one, acquirer has the power to appoint or remove the majority of the board of directors of the acquiree. So, syempre, having that extent of power, kumbaga, you will be able to control kasi. Okay? You will be able to control how the corporation is being run if you can assign or remove certain board of directors. Okay? And then number two, acquirer has the power to cast the majority of votes at board meetings or equivalent bodies within the acquiree. Uh, Sir, paano po yun? For example, si Company A, okay, for example, si Company A, meron siyang hawak na 40%. Punta tayo sa Excel. Mag-Excel tayo. Yan. For example, si Company A. Sample lang to ha. Wait. Yan. Si Company A, si Company B, then meron tayo ditong si Company C. Then Company D. Yan. For example, si Company A meron siyang 35% or 40%, let's say, na stocks or voting rights kay Company C. Then si Company B meron siyang 15%. Okay? And then si Company D naman meron siyang 45%. Okay. Tanong, given this situation, meron ba sa kanilang maituturing na parent company? Okay? Kumbaga, meron ba maituturing sa kanila na merong control? Okay? So, basing on this numbers only, you cannot infer na merong control any of this company. Okay? Because the threshold has not been met. The threshold has not been met, more than 50%. So lahat sila is below 50.01%. Okay, so hindi siya papasok sa threshold ng quantity. But what if, sabi sa problem, or sabi sa situation, Company B will follow the decision of Company A. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, whatever man yung gawing vote ni Company A, yun ang gagawing vote ni Company B. So, in total, ang magiging total na voting power ni Company A is 55%. Tama po? Pero originally, ang kanyang hawak lamang is 40% ng ordinary stocks. Pero dahil susundin daw ni Company B, kung ano man yung decision ni Company A when it comes to voting, Company A will be considered a parent company. Okay? So, it will be presumed that Company A has control over Company C. Nagets niyo po? Kasi, yun nga, meron tayong 55% na lumagpas na sa threshold na 55% yung 55%, sorry, sa threshold na 50.01% yung si Company A. Gets po natin? Yun yung example nung sa letter B. Okay? Equivalent bodies. Okay? So acquirer, number three, has the power over more than half the voting rights of the acquiree because of an agreement with other investors. So ayun, kagaya nung kanina, possible din example yon. Kumbaga nagkasundo si Company B and si Company A na parehas yung nagwin ng desisyon. So ang mangyayari, si Company A magkakaroon siya ng controlling interest na sa company because of that. So pwede silang mag-usap. Then last, acquirer has power to control the financial and operating policies of the acquiree because of law or an agreement. So internal agreement. Pero dapat syempre back yan ng papers. Dapat nakaano yan. Nakakontrata para safe. Next. So accounting for business combination. So, business combinations are accounted for using the acquisition method. By the way, yung ginamit kong reference for this is si Milan. Yung kay Milan pa din po. I hope meron kayong book na yun. Yung kay Sir Milan. So, we have four methods on how we will, three. Three steps on how we can compute specifically for the goodwill. Okay? Kasi most of the time, dito sa mga problems that you will encounter regarding this chapter is recognizing and measuring the goodwill or the negative goodwill, which is the gain on bargain purchase. Okay? Pag negative yung goodwill. So, alamin natin itong mga to. Ano po ba itong mga to? Unang step, napaka-procedural lang nung gagawin natin dito. No? So, number one is you identify the acquirer. So, here, I did not write the example sa module because I believe you all have books. So, I'm just referring you to page 10, example number 1 on the book. Again, the idea or the concept of being an acquirer, diniscuss na natin to kanina. Yan, ito yung mga concept na yan. So, you determine kung sino ba yung may control sa company. And then, number 2, after identifying the acquirer, you will determine the acquisition date. Okay po? You will determining the acquisition date. So, why do we need to determine the acquisition date? Basically, the acquisition date will be the basis of when you will measure the fair value of the assets to be uh, traded. Okay? The fair value of the assets to be traded. It will be considered on the acquisition date. So, the question is, how do we know if a certain date is the acquisition date? Okay? So, acquisition date is the date when the control is established. Okay po? The date when the control is established. Yan. So, most of the time, mali ako ng ano, yan. Most of the time, this is the closing date. Okay? So, most of the time, the closing date. But, yun nga, it can be earlier or later than the closing date if a written agreement provides the acquirer control of the acquiree on a date before the closing date. So, kung meron mang internal agreement, again, internal agreement, written internal agreement na earlier or later than the closing date, yung acquisition date, pwedeng yun yung gawin nating reference. Okay? So, that is step number 2. So, number 1, identify the acquirer. And number 2, determine the acquisition date. The date when control is established. And number 3 is recognizing and measuring goodwill. Sir, ano po ba yung goodwill? Okay? This step requires the recognition and measurement of the following. So, what is goodwill? So, sabi nga dito, goodwill is calculated as the difference between the amount of consideration transferred, kumbaga yung ibabayad or ititrade ni acquirer in exchange for the net identifiable assets of the acquiree. Okay po? So, it is calculated the difference between the amount of consideration transferred from acquirer to acquiree and net identifiable assets acquired. Okay po? Although, on a general definition, on business, goodwill is represented by the value of a company's brand name. Kumbaga, it is something intangible. Okay? It is something intangible kasi. So, good and somehow you cannot goodwill is not identifiable. Okay? So this is an example of an identifiable asset. So whenever we are considering the computation, mamaya mapakita natin the computation the for the goodwill or the fair value of the identifiable assets acquired, hindi natin sinasama yung existing goodwill ng parent company or ng parent company, sorry, ng i-acquired na company, ni acquiring. Hindi natin sinasama yun kasi we cannot identify that asset. It's not identifiable. Why? Because again, goodwill is represented by something like a value of company's brand name, solid customer base, good customer relations, good employee relations, and any patents or proprietary technology. So one example is, for example, the logo of Apple, right? So whenever you see the logo of Apple, you know that it's somehow premium. Kumbaga maiisip mo, ay Apple to. Kumbaga it is somehow premium. So that certain value that the people is perceiving at the logo is something that we cannot measure, right? So that is what we call a representation. Okay, again, it is a representation of what we call a goodwill in a business setting. Okay po? Pero dito sa business combi, again, kumbaga pinavisualize ko lang sa inyo, ba't ba nagkakaroon ng goodwill? So, parang ano yan eh, premium siya, markup siya on on a certain company because of those intangible characteristics or assets of the company. Okay? So, goodwill is calculated. Pag naman dito sa sa business combi, yun lang. Difference lang ng consideration na transfer and then lilas mo yung net identifiable assets acquired. So, ito yung formula. The formula may be used. So, the following formula may be used. So, consideration transferred, again, the amount or the fair value of the amount transferred by the acquirer to the acquiree. Then, next is NCI in the acquiree. Sir, ano po ba yung NCI na yan? NCI is what we call the non-controlling interest. So, there are times na hindi naman lahat ng interest binibili ng hindi lahat ng stocks binibili ni corporation, ni parent company. Pwedeng gawin ni parent or ni acquirer 60% lang, 80% lang, merong matitirang 20%. Yung 20% na hindi binili ni acquirer is what we call the non-controlling interest. Yun yung mga natira na mga natirang stocks na hindi niya na-acquire. So, those are the non-controlling interest. So, for you to be able to compute the goodwill, you will add that to the consideration transferred. Then, number 3 is previously held equity interest in the acquiree. For this one, will not yet apply on this chapter because this previously held equity interest by in the acquiree will only appear if a business or a subsidiary is purchased on a step-by-step basis. Okay? Kumbaga, ano siya, hindi siya isang bugsuan lang, hindi siya isang bagsakan lang na acquisition. Meron step-by-step acquisition na nangyari, kaya meron tayong consideration for previously held equity. Pero for this one, this kinds of transaction in which one time lang, isang bagsakan lang, wala tayong mako-compute or wala tayong mai-account na previously held equity interest. And then less, so pagka-total doon, less natin yung net identifiable assets acquired. So what is the net identifiable assets acquired? Again, these are uh, these are the these are the assets less the liabilities that are surely you can identify and quantify at the time that it was being measured. Okay? So, fair value acquired, ililess natin dun sa total ng tatlo. Then we will get a goodwill or a gain on bargain purchase. So Sir, how do we recognize goodwill? Goodwill will be, syempre, it will be accounted as an asset. It will be recognized on the statement of financial position, while the gain on bargain purchase will be recognized as part of other income. Okay, so papasok naman siya sa income statement. Hindi po. Goodwill, again, sa statement of financial position. This one, sa sa income statement. Okay, papasok doon. So, gain on bargain purchase. Pag negative, this is also called negative goodwill. Okay? So, ano naman nangyari? Ba't nagkaroon ng negative goodwill? Mas mura na naibenta si subsidiary kaysa dun sa expected na fair value niya. No? Mas mura siyang naibenta. It happens kapag nagmamadali, yon rush buy and sell. So, bilhin nila lang mas mura. Okay? So, isa-isahin natin, himayin natin itong part ng formula na to. So, number one is consideration transferred. So, consideration transferred, of course, it is measured at fair value. Most of the time, cash yan. So, wala ka nang kailangang igawing revaluation. Kung ano man yung face value niya, yun na yun. Yun na yung fair value niya pag cash. Okay? Hindi naman nagbabago ang fair value ng cash as time passes by. Kumbaga, the face value is the fair value kapag cash. Okay po? And applicable lang to sa mga non-current assets. So for example, ano rin, nag-ano sila ng vehicle na kumbaga in consideration for the subsidiary interest, pwede sila mag-release ng, pwede si company mag-release ng vehicle, properties, plant, okay? So those kinds of assets will be measured at fair value by the time that the control is, again, established, which is the sum of the acquisition date. Ayun, acquisition date fair values of the assets transferred by the acquirer. And then, the liabilities incurred by the acquirer to former owners of the acquiree and equity interest issued by the yan, acquirer. So, lagi nyo lang tatandaan, net yun. Okay? Net na consideration na transferred. Okay. Up next is non-controlling interest. Okay. So, nabanggit ko na ito kanina, NCI. It is also called as the minority interest or it is the equity in a subsidiary not attributable directly or indirectly to a parent. So, ito yung mga hindi naman hawak. Baga, mga yun nga, minority. And most of the time, yun nga, wala silang control over the decision making in the corporation. Okay po? So, that is NCI. So, NCI is measured either at, dalawa lang ang measurement. Sir, ano po ba ang priority gamitin dito? Depende sa problem. Okay? Depende sa problem. Pag ang nirequest ng problem, true fair value, you do it through fair value. Pag sinabi naman ng problem, proportionate share in net assets, so proportionate share naman in net assets. Pero paano kapag, sir, walang sinabi sa book, sa problem? Gagamitin mo dyan, for me, okay, for the sake of our discussion, is yung fair value. Okay? Since lahat naman dito binimeasure at fair value, it is also fair for that non-controlling interest to be measured as well at fair value. So, there are, tinignan ko kasi mga example sa libro, tsaka yung mga example sa mga quizzers. Dalawa yung dinidil nila na situation sa fair value. So, number one is, there's are certain occasions or situations wherein fair value is already given. Okay po? Kumbaga yung fair value ng NCI, meron ng nag-determine na professional, then that goes that yun na mismo yung gagamitin mo sa problem. Okay? Pag ganun yung na-encounter mo, na meron na agad given na fair value. Pero, kung wala, paano mo alamin ngayon yung fair value? Paano mo alamin amount ng NCI through fair value if there is no given directly for the NCI? Okay? So basically, the formula is, again, consideration transferred divided by controlling interest percentage and then multiplied by NCI percentage. You will arrive at the non-controlling interest through fair value. Ano lang po kadali? It is what it is. Yun yung makukuha mo na NCI. And number 2 is proportionate share in net assets. So, fair value of net identifiable assets acquired multiplied by NCI percentage. Ganun lang ulit din, kadali, NCI. So, paano ba to sir, paano ba sir yung tag dito? Paano ko sir siya kukomputin? So, meron tayo dito mga sample problems. So, bigyan ko sample problems para may apply mo itong mga formula na to. So, meron tayo ditong given. And then for number 1, we have two cases. So, number 1 is si Morax Corporation and si Geely Incorporated. So, ano ba ang goal? Tingnan mo muna yung tanong. So, if Morax Co. paid 3 million cash as consideration for the assets and liabilities of Geely, how much is the goodwill or gain on bargain purchase? And then, next one, case number 2. If Morax paid 2 million cash as consideration for the assets and liabilities of Geely, how much is the goodwill on the bargain purchase on the business combination? Okay. So, mag-compute tayo. Punta tayo sa Excel ulit. Let's go to the Excel. Yan. Delete natin. Delete natin to. Kukunin natin ngayon yung, ano ba first step? Identify the acquirer. Sa sitwasyon ba na to, sino ang acquirer? So, yun, ayun, kita mo na agad, acquired all of the assets. So, batik si Morax yung acquirer. And then, identify the closing date. When is the closing date? So, again, walang ibinigay na closing date. So, we will presume that this one is the closing date. The same. January 1, 20, X1. So, the question now is, yun, pinapakompute tayo ngayon ng goodwill or ng gain on bargain purchase. Ang ating measurement or formula to be used is, ito number 1. So, consideration transferred. Then, tama lang po pinapanap sa ating goodwill. And goodwill. And then, okay. Yan. NCI in the acquiry. Previously held. Equity interest in the acquiry. So, total mo. And then, less per value. Of net identifiable. Yan. Yan yung ating formula. Mag-aaral tayo ngayon sa goodwill. Kasi pinapahanap yung goodwill. Tama po ba pinapahanap yung goodwill? Ayan. How much is the goodwill? How much is the goodwill or gain on bargain purchase on the business combination? So, yung case number 1, there's a payment of 3 million pesos. So, again, sabi ko sa inyo kanina, as is, Cash is measured at face value to consider for, yan, 3 million, yan, 3 million. Sorry. Yan. So, magkano ngayon yung NCI in the acquiring? Meron mo sinabi? May sinabi ba sa problem kung magkano yung NCI? So, walang sinabi kung magkano yung sa ah, case number 1 tsaka sa case number 2. Dito sa specific problem, walang sinabi kung magkano yung non-controlling interest nung acquiring. So, ano ang magandang option ngayon? What is a good option for this? NCI in the acquiring. Actually, wala talaga pala wala pala talaga non-controlling interest kasi tinanggal lahat. Okay? So, zero to. Then previously held equity interest in the acquiring. Again, this is to be discussed kapag tayo meron ng step-by-step or step purchase method for business combination. So, wala yan. Total mo, 3 million. Yan. So, less FB of net identifiable assets. So, paano ko malalaman kung alin dito yung net identifiable assets? Tingin ka lang dun sa fair value, syempre. Okay? So, again, what is the amount of total assets? 3.2. Tama ba? Baka niloloko lang tayo. 40, 40,000. 22. 70, 700, 240, 20, 3.2. Okay? So, 3.2 million. Tama po ba 3.2? Yan, 3.2. Then meron tayong liability na 800,000. So 3.2 less 800,000. 2,400,000. Incurred transaction cost amounted to 200,000 for legal, accounting, and consultancy fees. So what will happen? Wait lang ha. So wala tayo ng tatlo sa taas. Pero magkano yung ating net identifiable asset? So check ko lang ha. So magkano ang total niya per value except goodwill? So 20,000, hindi, 3.2 pala, sorry. 3.2 minus mo na lang yung 40,000. Ba't may liles yung 40,000? Yan. Ba't may liles tong 40,000? Again, sinabi ko sa inyo kanina, goodwill is not an identifiable asset. Kailangan lang natin mga identifiable asset and identifiable liability. Goodwill is an example of an identifiable, hindi identifiable na asset. So basically, what will be the total? 3,160,000. Okay po? 3,160. Less to be assumed the amount and the liability 800K. So 2,360,000. 2 million 3 million. Wait lang. Sorry. Per value of net identifiable assets. So what will be the total? Wait lang guys. Okay, gets ko na. Sorry. Yan. So 2,360 yung total na net identifiable asset. Yan po, 2,360. Ngayon, paano ko malalaman yung amount ngayon ng goodwill? Yan. So, ang goodwill mo ngayon, gusto ko lang sa Excel. Yan, di pala nakalitaw. Ang goodwill mo ngayon is amounting to what? 640,000. So that is the case for case number 1. The answer would be 640,000. How about case number 2 naman? On case number 2, so case number 1 yan, ito yung case number 2. Sir, paano ito nakuha yung 2,360? Explain natin, paano nakuha ito. Yung 2,360 nakuha siya dito. Magkano yung total na fair value? Total fair value niya is 3.2. Okay? 3.2. And then, what's next? Meron ba siyang identifiable asset? Unidentifiable asset? Meron. Yung goodwill. Dito siya isasama. So, less 40,000. Less 40,000. And then next, magkano yung liability niya? 800,000. Yan. Yan yung naging computation. Ba't tayo nag-arrive sa 2,360? Po. Pinagbawas yung net identifiable asset sa identifiable liability. So, yun po. Tapos tinanggal din yung mga hindi identifiable na asset and liability. That is why we arrive at 640,000. So, that is case number 1. How about case number 2? How about what if the consideration transferred is 2 million? Yan. 2 million naman yung consideration transferred. Again, whole. Binili as a whole yung corporation or yung si company. So, 2 million naman ang consideration transferred. Again, same situation. What will happen here is, again, wala nga tayong NCI, wala rin tayong previously held equity. So, the total will be, wait lang ha. Yan. So, ang total niya is 2 million. Fair value of net identifiable assets, magbabago ba? Hindi naman, ano? Nagbago lang naman yung consideration transferred. So, 2,360 pa din. So, pagkano ang maging goodwill natin dito? Goodwill would be negative 360,000. So, this negative 360,000 will be reflected on the income statement. Okay? This is a negative goodwill. Ito kasing goodwill sa kabila, asset to, ina-amortize naman to, no? Na-amortize naman yan. Pero yung amortization, sa natin pag-aralan. So, goodwill, 360,000. Negative. Okay po? Negative goodwill. Gain on bargain purchase. So, that is how you answer problem number 1. How about problem number 2? What is problem number 2? Pakita lang natin sa screen. Yan. Ito. Marami tong case naman. Hanggang case number 4. So, case number 2. Case number 2. Problem number 2. On January 1, 20X1, Ayaka acquired 80% of the equity interest of Ayato Incorporated in exchange for cash. So again, face value lang dahil cash again yung consideration. Because the former owners of Ayato needed to dispose of their investments in Ayato by a specified date, they did not have sufficient time to market Ayato to multiple potential buyers. So nagmadali siya, no? So, as of January 1, 20X1, Ayato's identifiable assets and liabilities have fair values of 2.4 and 800,000 respectively. Okay, so case number 1 ulit. Lapat lang ulit natin yung formula. The formula. Liitan nga natin. Para makita natin yung case. Yan. Zoom in nyo na lang. So, yan. Sheet 2. Punta tayo sa sheet 2. So, case number 1. Again, same formula, consideration transferred. Ano pa? Kailangan natin. NCI in subsidiary. Ano pa? Isa, step by step ulit. Pero dyan din kailangan. So, previously held. Kailangan sa formula. Interest in the equity. Hindi pa naman ito kailangan. Pero lagay na rin sa formula. So, yan. Total. Yan. So, pagkabigay mo ng total, meron tayong tinatawag na, ano ililist natin dito? What would we less? Ano pinagkukumpara natin? Again, that will be the fair value of net identifiable asset. So, magkano ang consideration transferred under the problem? Case number 1, Ayaka Corporation elects the option to measure ng controlling interest at fair value. Ni-request niya fair value. An independent consultant was engaged that the fair value of 20% non-controlling interest in Ayato is 300,000. If Ayaka paid 2 million cash consideration for the 80% interest in Ayato, how much is the goodwill or gain on bargain purchase on the business combination? So, fill muna natin yung mga meron tayo, yung mga freebies. So, number 1 is consideration transferred, libre. 2 million yan. Yan. Okay. So again, back to the problem. So meron tayong consideration transferred na 2 million. Case number 1. 2 million nga ba? Sorry, hindi pala 2 million. Inelect ni Ayaka na gawing i-measure yung non-controlling interest at fair value. So ito meron tayong non-controlling interest kasi hindi na whole amount yung binili. Hindi na whole corporation yung binili, but instead, a percentage na lang ng corporation. So 80% of the equity interest of Ayato has been purchased. So, ayun, case number 1 again, ulitin ko lang, 2 million pala, sorry, consideration transferred, cash as consideration transfer for 80% of interest in Ayato. So ngayon, how will we measure the NCI in subsidiary? Knowing that we are going to use the fair value method. Okay po, ano ba formula natin for fair value? What is our formula for fair value? Although yun naman pala, binigay na pala dito sa problem. Hindi mo na kailangan computent. Nakalagay na rito, 310,000 na daw pala. Hindi mo na kailangan computent. So, you will just basically put 310,000 here. Yan. Wait. Lalag tayo. Yan. So, ito 0 ulit. Then, total. Magkano total natin? 2,310,000. So, tanong ngayon, magkano naman yung ating net identifiable asset? So, we can see here that we have the fair value of the identifiable asset and liability is 2.4 and 800,000. So, pag kinuha natin yung net, pag pinag-minus natin, we will arrive at 1.6. Tama ba? That will be the fair value of that identifiable asset. So subtracting the fair value of the net identifiable asset to the total consideration transferred and NCI, what will be the amount of goodwill? So the total goodwill would be 710,000. Okay po. So ganun lang kadali yung case number 1. How about case number 2? Ang case number 2 naman natin. Case number 2. So, kopyahin lang natin tong givens. I mean yung yung labels. So, case number 2 naman tayo. Yan. So, ganyan tayo dito consideration transferred, NCI. So, magkano ang consideration transferred for case number 2? Sabi dito, same lang din, binigyan na yung fair value. Binigyan na yung fair value ng NCI. Pinagkaiba lang, dito nagbayad naman si Ayaka. Instead of 2 million, 1,200,000. So, 1,200,000. Then, NCI niya, ganun pa din, given pa rin 310,000. We all know, wala pa tayong held interest. So, magiging total natin is 1.5 million. 1,510,000. Then, yung fair value ng net identifiable asset natin, hindi naman gumalaw. So, still, this will be measured at 1.6 million. So, total, yung goodwill natin, pinag-minus natin to, is negative 90,000. So, we have a gain on bargain purchase of 90,000. So, meron tayong negative goodwill na 90,000. So, you see, ganun lang po kadali. You just need to fill up muna yung formula. Alamin mo kung magkano, alamin mo kung alin yung mga kasama. And then, compute for the NCI. If given, yun yung gamitin. If hindi given, tanungin kung anong proseso, kung fair value or proportionate. Pag fair value, gamitin yung formula as per fair value. And then kung hindi naman fair value ng proportionate, gamitin yung formula sa proportionate. Okay po? Next, case number 3. Hanggang anong case ba to? Yung case number 4 pala to. So ito, kagaya ng sinabi ko kanina, this is for, at ito naman hindi na binigay yung hindi na binigay yung fair value ng ng wait lang. Yan. So hindi na binigay yung fair value ng NCI. So Ayaka Corporation elects the option to measure non-controlling interest at fair value. But on this one, hindi ibinigay yung value ng NCI. Nakalagay lang dito, a value of 250,000 is assigned to the 20% non-controlling interest in Ayato Incorporated. So, if Ayaka Corporation paid 2 million in cash as consideration for the 80% interest in Ayato, how much is the goodwill or gain on bargain purchase on the business combination? Okay. So, again, very easy. Hindi ibinigay. So, ano gagawin natin? Kukompute na lang natin. So, let's compute. Case number 3. Case number 3. So, consideration transfer natin is 2 million. NCI in subsidiary. Ito yung hindi binigay. Walang binigay na fair value. Pero, again, we will presume that we are going to use fair value through uh, computation. So, ito, nilagay na rito ni problem. Kung paano mo siya kukomputin. Again, that is the consideration transferred divided by controlling interest na pinurchase mo. So, 0.8. We will arrive at 2.5 million. Okay? And then, multiply mo by 20%, you will arrive at 500,000. Tanong, sir, yan na ba yun? Yun na ba yung sagot sa NCI in subsidiary? Or, tama, NCI? So, the answer is yes. Yan na yung NCI ni acquiree. Yan yung ginamit natin sa computation, sa formula. Yan yung na-acquire natin through formula. So, 500,000. Again, wala dito. So, total mo, magkano? 2.5 million. Magkano ang fair value? Pero gumalaw ba yung fair value ng identifiable asset? I think hindi, So, case number 3, still, it's going to be how much? 1 point, ilan nga ulit yun? 1.6. Tama po, 1.6. 1.6 pa din. So, 1.6. So, magkano to? 900,000 goodwill. Okay po? That is positive goodwill, okay, or goodwill. Again, to be recognized at statement of financial position. So, 900,000. You see the difference? Madali lang siya, no? Madali lang. Just need to follow the formula. So, case number 4. Again, copy-paste mo lang ulit to. Hanggang masanay ka. Case number 4 tayo. So, last case for this topic. Case number 4. No given fair value. But Ayaka Corp decided to opt for proportionate share naman yung gagamitin daw. Gusto ko naman proportionate share. So, how will I account for proportionate share? So, madali lang po ito, no? Madali lang ulit. So, again, get the amount of consideration transfer. Magkano? 2 million. So, magkano controlling interest in subsidiary? How will you compute for that? Based on the formula earlier. So, madali lang yan. All you need to do is what? Yung 1.6 kanina. So, saan ako yung 1.6? 2.4. minus mo yung 800,000 na liabilities. Yan po. So, meron ka 1.6 multiplied by 20%. Ganun lang kadali. Okay? So, we will arrive at 320,000. Yun na agad yung NCI in subsidiary. Kuha po ninyo. Again, kinuha lang natin yung fair value ng net identifiable asset. Then, multiply lang natin sa percentage ng non-controlling interest to arrive at the proportionate share of NCI in subsidiary. So, we have 320,000. Again, this is 0. So, how much will be the total of these three? So, 2,320,000. So, again, how much is the fair value of the identifiable asset? That is 1,600,000. Then the arising goodwill from this transaction will be 720,000. So, ganun lang po kadali yung computation ng goodwill under dito sa part 1. Part 1 pa lang to ng business combination. So class, I will be cutting the discussion muna dito. Then tutuloy natin along with another set of module. So please pakibasa na in advance para di kayo mahirapang makasunod sa mga susunod na topics. Ano? But yun nga, kung meron kayong question, feel free to message me through Telegram and I will respond during my free time. Okay po? So if you are going to have any question, yun po, PM niyo lang po ako sa Telegram or sa Messenger if makita ko man sa Messenger. Okay? So yun, sige, salamat class. Goodbye and see you on our next discussion. Bye-bye. Meron pala dito nakalagay, sorry. Meron pala nakalagay dito na quote. Basahin ko lang. Don't be distracted by what ifs, should haves, and if onlys. The one thing you choose for yourself, that is the truth of your universe. So ito nakuha ko to sa quote sa isang anime na napanood ko dati. So, kayo na bahala kung ano klase interpretation yan. Pero, that's a motivational quote na sana mapagpandaran nyo and ma-inspire kayo na if ever you have doubts today, if ever you have doubts and what ifs, if you have a lot of what ifs, one thing is only for sure. One thing is only the truth, and that is the thing you choose for yourself. Okay? So, sige class, goodbye, and God bless. See you on the next discussion.